Broadcasting from New York City to the world, it's the G-Man Interviews.
I got my undergraduate degree at MIT in biology, and my PhD is in computer science. And throughout my career, I've worked extensively in using computer science techniques to analyze language and looking at things like information summarization. Over the last 6 years, I've become extremely interested in biology, metabolism, and disease, and have gone back to my passionate subject, which is biology, and have been able to use the computer science techniques to help me process the research literature. And my goal is to try to understand biology at a systems level, always asking why is something happening, and then attempting to explain it through natural, known biochemical, biophysical mechanisms. So I was motivated to turn my attention to biology 6 years ago when my husband was, we were caught by surprise. He was diagnosed with heart disease, and surgery, a stent was inserted, and he was immediately put on a statin drug. And I was disappointed that I didn't know more about heart disease at that time, and so I immediately started studying everything I could about heart disease and about statin drugs, because he was experiencing side effects that I did not like. And I was well aware of the importance of cholesterol to the body from my studies at MIT as an undergraduate back before they had demonized cholesterol, and I knew that it was extremely important to the brain, because cholesterol, the brain contains 25% of the body's cholesterol with only 2% of the body's mass. So the brain is heavily concentrated in cholesterol, and that cholesterol is extremely important to its function. So I did not like the fact that he was taking a statin drug, and eventually I persuaded him to go off of it against his doctor's advice. And so for the last 5 years, he has not been taking a statin drug, and he's been doing very well in his health. So starting 6 years ago, I started reading everything I could from the biological literature and started to piece things together. I wanted to understand for myself what is causing heart disease. And in my journey, I ended up, I believe, discovering what is causing Alzheimer's as well. And I became intensely interested and began to write papers, even in association with people who have MDs, on things like Alzheimer's, diabetes, obesity, heart disease, autism. So I now have several papers published on these topics, especially in the last 3 years.
Welcome. Dr. Stephanie Seneff is a senior research scientist at MIT's Computer Science and Artificial Intelligence Laboratory in Cambridge, Massachusetts. She has degrees from MIT in both biology and computer science. Her recent interests have focused on the role of toxic chemicals and micronutrient deficiencies in health. She has published 18 peer-reviewed journal papers over the past 3 years on these topics and has delivered numerous slide presentations around the world. Dr. Seneff joins me to discuss her controversial report on glyphosate, a chemical used in the product Roundup, and its alleged link to autism in children in the United States. It's a pleasure to welcome you to the show, Dr. Seneff.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
For those who aren't familiar with the product, what is Roundup?
Roundup is an herbicide, and it's used to kill plants. It actually kills pretty much all plants except for those few that have been genetically engineered to be resistant to it. And those are the core crops of the processed food industry. Roundup has an active ingredient in it called glyphosate, which is the ingredient that I believe is causing a huge amount of problems with our health.
And what exactly is glyphosate, if you had to break it down in layman's terms?
It's a glycine. Glycine is an amino acid, which is a basic building block of proteins. Glyphosate is a modified glycine that has a phosphoryl group attached to it. So it's a very simple molecule, actually.
Your study and published reports allege there's a direct link between glyphosate and the increase in autism in children. Please explain.
Yes. Well, one thing is there's extremely strong evidence. If you look at over time, you look at the increased use of glyphosate on specifically corn and soy crops. Those are the crops that feed the processed food industry. And you look at autism rates in first grade, you find a perfect match between those two curves, 0.997. 1.0 would be perfect. 0.997 is very close to a perfect match, looking at the previous 4 years of glyphosate usage and the child in first grade. That's correlation evidence, but that correlation, of course, doesn't always mean causation, and many things are going up, although I haven't found anything else that matches that well to the autism. Once you see that kind of correlation, the first thing as a scientist you're going to do is to try to look for evidence from the biology that could explain the features of autism on the basis of what glyphosate does to biological systems. And when you do that, you really hit a home run. I've hit a home run in doing that.
And how long did you conduct your study before reaching this conclusion?
I had been studying autism seriously for about 8 years and had published several papers on autism, linking it to some other chemicals in the environment like aluminum. But it was only within the past 3 years, it was 3 years ago actually, or 3.5 years ago, that I became aware of glyphosate as a possibility. It wasn't something I thought of immediately because I was assured, as everyone was, that glyphosate is harmless to humans. That's supposed to be its great feature as an herbicide. You can go down to the hardware store and buy it. It's completely unregulated. People use it to kill the weeds in their lawn. So it wasn't something you would think of automatically as being the source of the trouble for that reason. So it took me quite a while to think of glyphosate as a possibility. And it was really because of Don Huber that I figured that out, because he pointed out the issues with glyphosate's effect on humans, and I knew that autistic kids had those issues.
And in terms of your research, did you primarily focus on children in the United States, or did you include children living abroad as well?
I focused on the United States because I had data from the United States, specifically for the autism correlation, although I am aware that Europe has much lower rates of autism than the United States does. And Europe also uses a lot less glyphosate. They are much more, they have a lot more regulation of the GMOs food. We are very enamored of the kinds of foods that are available, the protein bars, and of course, soy is everywhere. They make these pseudo foods out of these ingredients that they take apart from the soy and the corn. The high fructose corn syrup and the soy protein are everywhere in our processed food. And those things are likely to be high in glyphosate because they have been engineered to resist it, and therefore they soak it up without dying.
You've stated unequivocally that unless immediate action is taken, 50% of children in the U.S. could have autism by 2032. That's an extremely large percentage.
It is.
Those listening to this interview, they might ask the question, well, what would she cite as definitive proof of that claim? How would you respond?
It's basically a very simple mathematical procedure to extend the curve. It turns out that the growth that we've seen in autism over time, looking back to 1970, is exponential. And exponential growth has the property that if you take the log, you get a straight line. So it's extremely easy to push that line into the future and find out where it ends up at what time. And if you do that, you find 2032 is the magic number as the date when half the kids born, 80% of the boys born, will be on the autism spectrum if we simply continue as we've been doing. And my impression is that we are continuing because no one in the government seems interested in taking a look to see if glyphosate is indeed responsible for the epidemic.
Again, people listening to this interview, be they doctors, lay people, or scientists, may say what you're claiming and doing is pointless because there's no way to prevent anyone from having an emotional, physical, or psychological reaction to any chemical agent that's sprayed on the nation's crops. If it's not glyphosate, then it'll be something else down the road. It's the price we pay to protect the nation's food supply. What would you say to them?
Yes, well, I am afraid that if they do finally wake up and realize that glyphosate is toxic, all they'll do is just, for example, substitute glyphosate, which is probably equally toxic. And in fact, I think all of them, anything that can kill the weeds, is going to be a biocide. And basically our whole policy towards managing human life is based on killing other life. I mean, we're basically, and of course, everyone's taking antibiotics to fight infection. It's all anti-life, antibacterial soap. This is the wrong way to go. We need to be pro-life. We need to support all the living things, and the microbes in the soil are incredibly important for soil health And without soil health, the plant's not healthy. The plants become vulnerable to fungus, and we're seeing that now because the glyphosate is killing off the soil microbes and causing stress to the plants. So we can turn it around. What we need is for the government to invest in research that's going to look for how to do sustainable agriculture efficiently. And there are farmers who are working on that and who are finding really delightful results. I mean, I've watched a wonderful video of a farmer who showed how he could really transform his field into something that earned him more money than he would have gotten if he were using the herbicides, through a strategy that involves a lot of things, but mostly involves nourishing the soil and trying to make it healthy again. That also saves the water, by the way. Right now we have a huge drought in California.
Right.
And part of the reason is because the water just runs right off the soil. The soil is not like a sponge anymore because the soil is not healthy. So the water gets lost when it rains.
Have you contacted Monsanto executives and made them aware of your findings? And if so, how did they respond?
I have not. Not yet.
Okay. Well, for the record, the corporate office was contacted to submit responses or comments regarding the allegations made, and I've yet to hear from them. I just wanted to make that note for my audience and for your information.
That's interesting.
MIT is located in Massachusetts, a state represented by the extremely popular U.S. Senator Elizabeth Warren. Have you met with the senator or other elected officials to discuss the issue, and if so, how did they react to your report?
I have met with other officials in Massachusetts, and it was not a very rewarding meeting because it didn't seem like they were really listening. It was not Elizabeth, however, and I have corresponded with her through email, and I have hope with Elizabeth. I believe that she is becoming aware of the issue. I haven't told her the exact, story that I have, but I have certainly encouraged her to think in terms of sustainable agriculture. And I would love to see her, of course, run for president because I think she would be a good choice.
When I researched your background, I discovered you hold 4 degrees, including 3 from MIT. Is that correct?
They're all from MIT.
They're all from MIT. This being the case, why are some of your colleagues in the medical community calling you a quack?
I think it's because they feel threatened. I mean, I'm amused by these attacks because I don't think you can find many people with the kinds of credentials I have. And I do have a degree in biology. It's an undergraduate degree from MIT in biology, which does mean that I've taken a lot of biology courses, but I don't have graduate training in biology. My graduate training is in computer science and electrical engineering.
And when you say they consider you a threat, could you go into that a little more?
I think that it must be the case that the people who are trying to discredit me are people who are vested in the industry. I mean, I haven't tried to prove that, but it would make sense. But of course, what I'm saying is going to be tremendous loss to the company that produces this product. And that's a threat, and I can't, prevent glyphosate from being toxic. I can only try to hope that people will listen and stop eating the food that contains the glyphosate. I believe the response needs to be grassroots, and it needs to be people choosing to buy only organic food. And if they do that, then the farmers will realize that organic food will sell. And farmers will be encouraged then to switch to organic farming practices. And we can do this grassroots. And I think that's the way it's going to happen first. The government, I think, is going to be a Johnny-come-lately to the game.
Is organic the only way to go, or is there another chemical, a much safer chemical, if there is such a thing, that can be used instead of glyphosate?
I would not recommend it. I think whatever one we choose is going to have the same story. It'll be different symptoms and different kinds of diseases will show up, but it'll be equally toxic. I don't think we can get around the fact that if you poison the food that's being grown, you're going to poison yourself. I don't think we can get around that. We have to get rid of the idea of putting toxic chemicals on the crops. We have to go back to organic. And I believe we can. The United States is resourceful. We have, people who are ingenious and creative. People can find a way. It can work. Right now, we have a really ridiculous system that we use where we put these toxic poisons on the corn and soy crops that we grow. And then we use the corn and soy, which contains those toxic chemicals. We feed it to the cows, which makes the cows toxic. It makes the cows sick. It makes their manure toxic. And then we pile their manure into these catchment basins that are basically like giant sewers. And those become toxic to the people around them. So the cows, of course, are also being fed all these antibiotics. Glyphosate itself is an antibiotic. This is causing our crisis that we see right now in antibiotic resistance in the hospitals. And the soil is being ruined. The cows are sick. You eat the meat from the cow, which is not good for you. Everything is bad. If you simply get rid of the corn and soy, turn it back into grass, put the cows on the grass, to me that seems like that solves a huge number of problems. And actually it's even the case that agriculture, the chemical agriculture that's causing, is a major contributor to global warming. So we've also got the climate crisis that we're facing for the same reason that we're facing the poison crisis. And all of these things can be fixed by simply putting the cows back on the grass. It makes a huge amount of sense to me. The government should be responding, and they should be making major changes in how they reward agriculture. They could reward people who choose to put the cows on the grass, and they could reward people who grow crops without using chemicals. And they could punish people who use chemicals. I mean, there's many things they could do if they were willing, but they don't seem to be willing.
Has MIT stood firmly behind you ever since you released this report?
Yes. I have good support from both from my sponsor and from my boss at MIT.
How can people reach you for more information on your report and articles you've written?
Well, I have a web page. It's called people, people.csail.mit.edu/Seneff, SENEFF. So I have a lot of things posted on my webpage, including various papers that I've written. I've collaborated with Anthony Samsel, and we've got 3 papers out, which we call Glyphosate 1, 2, and 3.
I'm sorry, Anthony Samsel?
Anthony Samsel, yes. He's a very interesting person who's an expert chemist and a toxicologist. And he and I have been collaborating on papers. And I've got papers published together with other people as well. I'm doing a lot of collaboration, busy writing some more papers, radio interviews, and there's a lot of stuff out there that's my stuff. And of course, you can also find things by other people who are aware of this problem as well.
Given the fact that you've collaborated with these renowned scientists and colleagues, it's astounding to me that you've been attacked the way that you have.
Well, it's astounding to me too, but the world is quite mixed up right now, I think. Money speaks. I think it's a problem that the money is so huge that the people who are vested in it don't want to change the system. I'm sorry to say that, but I think that is the way things are.
It's been a pleasure to have you on the show, Dr. Seneff. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's going to do it for this edition of the G-Man Interviews. I'm the G-Man, and I thank you for joining me. Until next time, stay cool, stay safe, and stay informed.